I used to think silence was peaceful. Now it felt like punishment. Every morning began the same way. Jason would leave before sunrise, his footsteps echoing through the hall like a daily reminder of how far we'd drifted. A brief kiss on the forehead, a mumbled, "Don't forget to check the mail," and the door would close behind him. The quiet that followed wasn't serene. It was hollow. I stood by the window in my robe, cradling a lukewarm mug of coffee, watching condensation trickle down the glass. Another gray day. Another stretch of hours alone in this house that looked perfect from the outside, but felt colder with each passing week. Jason and I had been married for 6 years. The early days were filled with passion, late-night conversations, spontaneous road trips. But somewhere between promotions, deadlines, and adult responsibilities, we became polite strangers sharing a mortgage. He wasn't cruel. In fact, Jason was the kind of man people admired, disciplined, responsible, generous in ways that were practical. But love, real love, doesn't survive on mortgage payments and oil changes alone. It needs warmth, laughter, touch, and those things had withered like the potted fern I kept forgetting to water. I tried. God knows I tried. I lit candles at dinner. I wore his favorite perfume. I suggested therapy once. He dismissed it with a shrug, saying, "We're fine, Claire. You just overthink things." That was his way. If it wasn't broken on paper, he wouldn't fix it. But I was breaking. Quietly, invisibly, one unreturned glance at a time. It was during one of those particularly still mornings that Jason mentioned, almost as an afterthought, that his brother Ethan would be stopping by while he was out of town. He just needs to grab some documents from the study. "Shouldn't take long," Jason said, tossing his suitcase into the trunk of his car. "Be nice to him. He's going through a rough patch." I nodded, though I barely remembered Ethan. He'd lived overseas for years, and the last time I saw him was at our wedding, flashing a dazzling smile, tossing witty comments like confetti, the type of man who filled a room without even trying. Funny. I remembered him more vividly now than I remembered what Jason's kiss felt like. The day Jason left, I wandered the house like a ghost in my own life. I dusted already clean shelves, rearranged books I never read. I even tried baking muffins from scratch, something I hadn't done since our first year of marriage. The knock at the door startled me. It was late afternoon. Light filtered through. The kitchen blinds in narrow gold streaks. I wiped my flour-covered hands on a towel and opened the door. "Claire," Ethan said, his voice smooth, familiar. "Long time." He looked different. Older, yes, but in that rugged, weathered way that made him seem carved rather than aged. His jaw was dusted with a day-old beard, his eyes a striking hazel that didn't match Jason's at all. Where Jason was polished, Ethan was effortless. He stepped inside, and the scent of rain and cedar followed him. "Just came for the papers," he said, lifting a hand casually. "Right. The study's down the hall. You remember?" He nodded, but lingered. "Something smells good," he said, glancing toward the kitchen. "Muffins," I said. "Too many for one person." He grinned. "Lucky for you, I'm starving." We sat at the kitchen table, the air between us, carrying something unspoken. Ethan talked about his travels, his recent return to the States, how disillusioned he'd become with the pace of everything. I listened, fascinated. He asked questions, real ones, about my art, my writing, things Jason hadn't mentioned in months. I found myself laughing, actually laughing. And when he looked at me, it wasn't like I was invisible. It was like I was seen. It shouldn't have felt that good. An hour passed, then 2. He eventually stood, documents in hand, ready to leave. But before he stepped out, he turned back. "You know," he said, his voice low, "I always thought Jason married out of his league." I opened my mouth to protest, to deflect, but the words never came. He smiled, slow and knowing. "I'll see you around, Claire." And just like that, he was gone. I closed the door behind him and leaned against it, heart pounding in a way I hadn't felt in years. Not from love, not yet. From something far more dangerous. Certainly. Here is Chapter 2 of your infidelity story script, continuing directly from Chapter 1. It maintains a focused, emotionally layered narrative and advances both character development and the core conflict. Chapter 2, The Spark Beneath the Surface. Word count, RE7 and 60. I told myself it was harmless. A brief visit. A shared laugh. A compliment from someone who didn't see me as part of the furniture. But Ethan's words echoed in my mind long after he'd gone. I always thought Jason married out of his league. A week passed. Jason called every night, his voice tired and perfunctory, reciting logistical updates like a man reading off a grocery list. He didn't ask how I was feeling. He didn't ask if Ethan had stopped by. I didn't offer. I tried to distract myself, painted for hours, scrolled endlessly through social media, even organized the kitchen drawers alphabetically. But nothing silenced the flicker Ethan had reawakened. On Friday afternoon, it flickered, back into flame. I was reading in the living room when I heard it again, that same knock. The same rhythm. I opened the door, heart already betraying me with its quickening pace. Thought I'd return the favor, Ethan said, holding up a paper bag. Brought coffee and actual edible pastries. You didn't have to, I began. But I wanted to, he cut in, his gaze never leaving mine. I stepped aside. This time it felt different. He moved with ease, like he belonged here, like he'd never left. We sat at the kitchen table again. The same chairs, the same pull of something unspeakable between us. We talked. About art, about memory, about how strange it is to look at someone you once knew and see them entirely differently. Ethan had that gift. He made every conversation feel like a confession. Jason always wanted to be the hero, he said, stirring his coffee. Even when we were kids, straight A student, captain of everything, always polished. But you... He paused, eyeing me carefully. You're not someone he understands. I frowned. What's that supposed to mean? It means you're all feeling and fire, Claire. And Jason, he's glass and angles. Safe, but cold. I swallowed hard. That's not fair. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. Then why do you look like someone waiting to be rescued? His words hit me like a slap and a caress all at once. I stood, flustered. You don't know what you're talking about. He didn't move. Maybe, or maybe I know exactly what I'm talking about. Maybe I see it because I'm the only one who's actually looking. The rain started again, sharp, fast drops tapping against the windows like a warning. I crossed the room needing space, needing air, but the room felt too small, like the walls were inching closer. I heard him stand behind me. I should go, he said, but there was no conviction in it. I turned to face him. We stood only inches, apart now. Close enough to feel the warmth radiating between us, that dangerous current begging to be crossed. This is wrong, I whispered, though I wasn't sure who I was trying to convince. I know, he replied, softer than before. So stop me. I didn't. It started with a breath, mine, sharp and trembling. Then his hand grazed my cheek, his thumb brushing along the line of my jaw. His touch was cautious, reverent, like he didn't want to break me. But something in me was already breaking. When his lips met mine, the world fell away. There were no husbands, no obligations, no consequences. Just warmth, hunger, and the unbearable relief of being seen, touched, wanted. Time bent. It may have been minutes or hours before. I pulled away, breathless, eyes wide with the weight of what we'd just done. Ethan looked at me like he was trying to memorize every inch of my expression. I shouldn't have come, he said quietly. But you did, I replied. He left without another word. The door clicked shut, and I was alone again. Only now. The silence wasn't empty. It was electric, and I knew nothing could go back to how it was. Jason returned on a Sunday evening, suitcase in one hand, his phone in the other, barking instructions to someone from the office. He kissed my cheek absently as he passed me in the foyer, like someone patting a mailbox on their way inside. Everything about him was the same, and I hated that I wasn't. I watched him unpack, move around the bedroom like he'd never left, unaware that something fundamental had shifted while he was gone, that something had snapped open inside me and wouldn't close again. For 2 days, I said nothing. I cooked, nodded, performed the role. But guilt clung to my skin like smoke, and Ethan's kiss haunted me in every quiet moment. I told myself it was a mistake, a slip, but lies are loud when spoken in silence. By Wednesday, I was unraveling. Jason. Noticed? Barely. He asked if I was feeling sick. I wanted to scream, "I'm drowning," but instead I smiled and said I was tired. That night, as I folded laundry, a photo slipped out from Jason's travel bag. A printed selfie. Ethan's grinning face, half shadowed by sunlight. In the background, blurry but unmistakable, was me. Standing in the kitchen. Jason picked it up behind me. "Did Ethan take this when he came by?" he asked casually. I turned too slowly. "Yes, he stopped in for coffee. I didn't know he took that." Jason examined the photo longer than necessary. Then he placed it down, his face unreadable. That was the beginning of the end. The following morning, he was colder than usual. Short answers, distracted. His phone stayed glued to his hand, his eyes avoiding mine. My chest tightened with every hour. By dinner, the silence was too loud to ignore. "Is there something you want to tell me?" he asked. I froze. My fork hovered mid-air. I tried to speak, but the truth was too heavy on my tongue. I asked, "Ethan," Jason continued, "why he stayed so long that day? Why you were in the background of a photo he didn't need to take?" I lowered my gaze. He nodded slowly, bitterness creeping into his expression. "Did you sleep with him?" I couldn't lie. Not now. Not anymore. "Yes," I whispered. The words shattered everything. Jason stood abruptly, his chair screeching against the tile. He didn't yell. He didn't throw things. That would have been easier. Instead, he stared at me like I was someone he had never met. "I trusted you," he said, voice low and sharp. "He's my brother." "I know," I said, blinking. Back tears. "I'm sorry, I didn't plan it. I was lonely. I felt invisible." He laughed, one harsh, humorless sound. "So you decided to fix that with my brother?" "I tried to talk to you, Jason, for months. You were never really here." "I was working to keep this life together." "And I was trying to survive inside it," I said, my voice cracking. "I didn't mean for it to happen, but it did. And I can't take it back." Silence settled over us like a verdict. That night, Jason slept in the guest room. The next morning, he left early. No note, no text, just absence. Ethan didn't call, didn't message. He disappeared from my life as quickly as he'd entered it. Maybe he felt guilty. Maybe he knew the cost. Maybe he never intended to stay. Days passed, then weeks. The air in the house grew still again, but this time, it was laced with finality. Jason moved his things into the spare room permanently. Conversations became logistical, robotic. There was no yelling, just decay. One afternoon, I sat across from Nina at a small cafe downtown. I told her everything. She listened quietly, then said, "You weren't wrong for needing more, but you were wrong for how you tried to find it." I nodded. There was nothing left to defend. "What now?" she asked. I stared out the window, watching people pass by. Strangers with unknown stories, walking forward without looking back. "I don't know," I said honestly. but I can't stay in this house pretending anymore. The next morning, I packed a bag. Jason didn't stop me. He watched me from the doorway as I slipped on my coat. "I hope you find whatever it is you were looking for," he said. I turned to him, eyes stinging. "I hope you do too." And with that, I left. Not for Ethan, not for redemption. For myself.